The evening was quiet, almost unnervingly so, when I returned home. She had called earlier, her voice light, casual, almost dismissive. "Don't wait up," she'd said. I'd brushed it off at the time, thinking she just wanted her space after a long day. But there was something in the tone, something subtle that didn't sit right. A sliver of unease crept in, a whisper of doubt I couldn't shake. I parked the car in the driveway, the engine's hum fading into the night. The house was dark, the kind of dark that hides things, waits for mistakes, for missteps. I stepped inside, shoes clicking softly against the polished floor. Normally, I would have called out a greeting, waited for her familiar voice to echo back, maybe catch the sound of the TV or music she often left on. But there was only silence. That silence made my chest tighten. I moved cautiously toward the bedroom, every step measured, every sense alert. The hallway smelled faintly of vanilla air freshener, masking something underneath, a scent that was vaguely unfamiliar. My throat felt dry. I opened the door just a fraction, peeking inside. First, it seemed empty. The bed looked untouched on one side, the sheets slightly rumpled on hers. Then I saw it, or rather him. A man was lying on her side of the bed, sprawled carelessly as if he belonged there. My first thought was disbelief. My heart slammed against my ribs. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. My legs refused to move, my hands clenching at my sides. The room seemed to shrink, the walls pressing closer, the air thick with a tension I had never felt in my own home. She turned then, a startled gasp escaping her lips. I can explain," she stammered. Her eyes darted between me and him, searching, pleading, trying to buy time, to construct a lie quick enough to save herself. But the truth was already written on his presence. In the way he lay there, too comfortable, too familiar. My mind raced, each thought sharper than the last. Every reassurance, every memory of trust, every shared promise now felt like fragile glass, shattered at once. I stepped fully into the room, trying to maintain some semblance of composure. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice low, steady, though inside it was anything but. I wanted to scream, to lash out, to throw everything into chaos. But I couldn't. Years of discipline, of trying to control my reactions, kicked in. My anger was a quiet, searing fire, burning behind my eyes, behind clenched teeth. She hesitated, then tried to speak. It's not what it looks like," she whispered. Her words were hollow, meaningless. How could anything she said undo the image burned into my mind? The man on my bed, the betrayal staring back at me, the weight of every lie I hadn't seen coming. It was all too real. I could feel my hands shaking despite my effort to stay calm. My heart raced, a relentless drumbeat in my chest. I turned to him then, the intruder, this symbol of deceit in my sanctuary. His eyes met mine, wide, guilty but also calculating. There was a smugness there, a careless arrogance that fueled my anger even more. How dare he lie on my bed, take my place without a thought. I wanted to say something sharp, something that would make him feel the sting of intrusion, but I knew confrontation would only escalate what was already unbearable. I stepped back, taking in the room, the scene, the betrayal in full. My mind replayed every previous innocent evening she had asked me to stay late at work. Every time she had said she was meeting a friend when I had no reason to doubt her. Each memory now felt tainted, a stitch in a pattern I had been blind to. The clarity hit hard, cold and unrelenting. I had been deceived, not just tonight, but for far longer than I realized. I swallowed hard, trying to calm the storm inside me. I couldn't act rashly. I had to think, to plan, to reclaim some control over a situation that had violently stripped it away. My life, my dignity, my trust, they were on the line. She saw the decision flicker in my eyes, the silent vow that nothing would remain the same. Her lips trembled as she tried to speak again, but I raised a hand, stopping her. No explanations, no justifications, not yet. I left the room slowly, deliberately. Each step echoed like judgment in the empty house. I paused at the top of the stairs, looking back once, letting the image burn into memory. I would not cry, not tonight. I would not beg, not tonight. I had to plan, to rebuild, to reclaim. The anger, the betrayal, the heartbreak. They would fuel a transformation, one that would make the pain she caused powerless. I walked into the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and let the cool liquid steady my shaking hands. I knew I had to reach out to my closest friend first, the one who had always been a grounding force in my life. Theo would know what to do, where to start, how to survive this without losing myself. I sent a brief message, "Need to talk. Urgent." Then I sat down, staring at the darkened room beyond the kitchen doorway, the weight of reality pressing down on me. The night stretched on, each minute dragging, yet filled with a strange clarity. I realized that life as I knew it had ended, but a new path was opening, one that demanded courage, discipline, and relentless self-respect. I would not be the man who tolerated deceit. I would not be the man defined by betrayal. Tonight marked the beginning of a journey, one I would undertake with calculated resolve, measured steps, and the determination to emerge stronger, wiser, and unshakably grounded. As I finally sat back, letting the first surge of adrenaline subside, I made a silent vow. Every lie, every secret, every moment of deceit would be met not with vengeance, but with transformation. I would take control of my narrative. I would rise above humiliation and heartbreak. And when the dust settled, when the storm of betrayal had passed, I would stand taller, stronger, and more respected than ever before. The bed, the man, the lies, they would not define me. My actions, my discipline, my resilience, they would. The next morning, I didn't sleep. I hadn't needed to. My mind replayed the image of him on our bed, her guilty, trembling expression, the unbearable truth of it all. Every thought was sharp, cutting through the fog of disbelief that had kept me numb the night before. I felt betrayed in a way that left no room for excuses, no room for denial. I needed clarity, and I needed action. I started by surveying the house, room by room, looking for anything that might confirm my suspicions further. My hands ran over the furniture, over objects she'd left out carelessly, searching for a clue, a trace, anything that suggested she had been preparing this deception for longer than a single night. Every closet, every drawer I checked only intensified the ache. The betrayal wasn't just physical. It was meticulously emotional, a violation of trust that left a sting deeper than anything I had imagined. She tried to approach me while I was in the kitchen, attempting a casual tone, but I didn't look at her. My silence was a shield, a wall I built around myself to keep the raw fury from spilling over. "We need to talk," she said, her voice wavering. But there was nothing to talk about. Words couldn't erase the scene I had witnessed. They couldn't undo the long nights of lies or the countless moments when I had trusted her implicitly. I finally turned to her, my voice calm but icy. "I saw him," I said simply. No theatrics, no shouting, just truth. The way I delivered it carried weight, and she flinched. I could see the immediate shift in her demeanor, the nervous darting of her eyes, the tremor in her hands. She opened her mouth, probably to weave a story, but I raised a hand to stop her. Not yet. She would have to face the consequences, and the truth was already painfully clear. I stepped outside for air, letting the morning sun hit my face, trying to calm the storm inside. Each breath felt heavy, loaded with the anger and grief I was working through. My chest ached not just from heartbreak, but from the physical weight of betrayal pressing on me. I realized that for the first time in a long while, I was seeing things as they truly were, without the filter of love or hope clouding my judgment. The reality was brutal, but in that brutality, there was clarity. I called Theo, my closest friend, who had been my anchor in difficult times before. Within minutes, he arrived, his presence a grounding force. "You all right?" he asked, surveying my tense posture. I shook my head, not trusting words to convey the magnitude of what had happened. Instead, I showed him the scene, recounting every detail, every subtle hint that I had overlooked. His expression hardened as he listened, nodding, understanding the depth of the betrayal without needing explanation. Theo suggested practical steps. First, documenting everything not for revenge but for protection. Photographs, messages, evidence of deception. It wasn't just about legal matters. It was about reclaiming control, proving to myself that I was not powerless. I followed his advice, methodically gathering evidence, each action restoring a fragment of my dignity. The anger was still there, simmering, but it became a tool, a fuel rather than a poison. By midday, I had reached out to a lawyer, someone discreet and professional. I didn't want drama or exposure. I wanted control, structure, a plan. Clara Mendez, a meticulous and highly recommended attorney, listened intently, absorbing the situation with a calm authority that eased some of my tension. Together, we mapped out the steps, protecting assets, understanding legal rights, and preparing for potential confrontation. I felt a flicker of empowerment, knowing that I could act strategically rather than react impulsively. Physical activity became my next outlet. I laced up my running shoes and hit the streets, the cold morning air stinging my lungs as I pushed forward. Each step felt like a small victory over the helplessness that had gripped me. Running became more than exercise. It was therapy, a way to process anger, betrayal, and grief. The miles passed, and with each one, I felt layers of tension peel away, replaced by a quiet focus. My body began to mirror my internal resolve. Leaner, stronger, more alert. Throughout the day, I avoided her, keeping interactions minimal and controlled. Every time she tried to approach, I maintained distance, a physical and emotional boundary that made clear. Trust had been broken, and it would not be rebuilt lightly. She sent messages, apologies thinly veiled as attempts at reconciliation, but I ignored them. Each unread message felt like a victory, a small reclaiming of my autonomy. By evening, I was exhausted but not defeated. I had processed some of the initial shock, begun to plan my steps, and established boundaries. The betrayal was still a raw wound, but I was no longer the passive participant. I was becoming an active agent in my own life. I realized that her actions had given me something she never intended, a reason to refocus, to rebuild, to reclaim my dignity. Dinner passed without her presence. I sat alone, reflecting on the magnitude of the day. Every detail of the morning haunted me, yet I found solace in the control I had begun to assert. I made notes of everything: thoughts, feelings, actions. Writing became a secondary release, a way to channel emotion into clarity and strategy. By the end of the night, I had a plan: document, protect, rebuild. Each step forward was a silent promise to myself that I would not be defined by her betrayal. The night stretched on, and sleep finally found me, restless but necessary. In my dreams, the image of him on the bed persisted, yet it was no longer paralyzing. It was fuel. By morning, I was determined to approach this methodically, without rashness, with a clear mind and steady hand. Betrayal had entered my life, but it would not control it. I had the tools, the plan, and the resolve to ensure that my path forward was one of self-respect, discipline, and eventual triumph. The following days were a mix of numbness, strategy, and silent observation. I watched her from a distance, noting the cracks in her behavior, the hurried messages, the subtle shifts when she realized I wasn't responding. Every glance she threw my way was a reminder of the power I had reclaimed simply by staying composed. I refused to engage in argument or confrontation. My silence was louder than any words could ever be. Theo remained a constant anchor, checking in multiple times a day. "Don't let anger make decisions for you," he warned. I nodded, appreciating his advice, though inside the fire of betrayal still burned fiercely. Each time I spoke with him, I could feel clarity sharpening, like a knife being honed. I was beginning to understand that this wasn't just about revenge. It was about reconstructing my life on my own terms. I started documenting everything more meticulously. Texts, social media interactions, small inconsistencies in her stories. They all became pieces of a puzzle. I cataloged them in a digital folder, not out of obsession, but as a practical step. I knew that confronting her directly would be meaningless without evidence, and that if this ever reached legal channels, I needed clarity. Beyond practicality, organizing these details gave me a sense of control I hadn't felt in weeks. Amidst this mental preparation, I carved out time for physical focus. Running became ritualistic. Early morning, precise distances, strict pacing. The rhythm of my steps mirrored the mental discipline I was cultivating. Sweat and exhaustion became my catharsis. Each mile a step further away from betrayal and closer to rebuilding the man I knew I could be. My body changed along with my mindset. Strength and endurance grew in tandem with confidence and self-control. At work, I threw myself into tasks I had neglected. Projects that once seemed tedious now felt like opportunities to excel, to channel frustration into accomplishment. Bosses noticed. Colleagues noticed. Small wins at the office became reminders that my value extended far beyond the walls of my failing marriage. Each achievement reinforced the principle that respect, true respect, was earned through action, not demanded through empty words. One evening, I received a call from Clara, my lawyer. "We need to proceed with the filing," she said calmly. I had anticipated this moment, and the preparedness made it less daunting. The documents, the signatures, the formal separation, it was all necessary. A statement that my life would no longer be dictated by betrayal. While part of me ached at the formality of it, another part felt liberated. I wasn't merely escaping, I was asserting autonomy. Meanwhile, she tried to reach me, her texts desperate yet polite. "Can we talk? I need you to understand." One read. I didn't reply. Each message left unread became a reinforcement of my resolve. I was no longer her crutch, her safety net. My value wasn't a tool she could wield. She had chosen deceit, and I had chosen self-respect. In the quiet moments of the night, I began writing again, documenting not only the betrayal but my response to it. Words became a weapon and a shield simultaneously, a way to process the swirling emotions without succumbing to them. Each paragraph reflected my journey from disbelief to clarity, from anger to measured action. This writing would later evolve into something more, a voice for others who had been silenced by similar betrayals. The weeks passed, and the initial sting dulled into a sharp, focused awareness. I began reconnecting with friends I had distanced myself from, reinforcing my support network. Social outings became affirmations of life beyond her lies. Laughter, casual conversation, shared victories. All of it reminded me that the world was larger than this chapter of deceit. One morning, while reviewing the evidence folder, I realized the extent of her manipulation. Each lie, each hidden encounter, each subtle deflection painted a picture of premeditated betrayal. The anger flared momentarily, but I channeled it into clarity. There would be no impulsive confrontation, no reckless displays. This was about justice measured, controlled, and ultimately personal victory. Then came the moment I had anticipated yet dreaded, the confrontation. She arrived at the house unannounced, standing at the doorway with a pleading expression. Her eyes searched mine, seeking forgiveness, understanding, perhaps even manipulation. I didn't step back. I didn't flinch. My voice was calm, deliberate. "I know," I said simply, letting the weight of those two words settle in the air. She faltered, realizing the depth of my awareness. Her excuses poured out, a flood of words attempting to explain what could not be excused. I listened, letting each one hit me, but I didn't respond. My silence spoke volumes. I wasn't there to argue. I was there to assert that the power had shifted. The betrayal was hers to bear, the consequences hers to face. And as I watched her shrink under the weight of her own deception, I felt a quiet vindication. I spent the next few days finalizing details for the legal process. Meetings with Clara, signing documents, confirming filings. It was all methodical, precise, deliberate. Each step reaffirmed my autonomy. Each signature a declaration that my life was no longer tethered to her choices. It was a stark contrast to the chaos she had tried to instill, and the order it brought reinforced my sense of control. In parallel, I began rebuilding my social identity. I returned to hobbies long neglected: guitar, photography, running, and found solace in creative expression. These outlets weren't escapes. They were affirmations of self. They reminded me that my life was mine to shape, that joy could exist independently of deceit. With each passing day, the weight of betrayal lightened, replaced by empowerment and renewed purpose. Finally, the day came when she attempted one last plea. Standing in the rain outside my house, drenched, eyes wide with desperation, she begged for reconciliation. I stepped out, the cold drops soaking my clothes, and met her gaze without flinching. "You didn't need me when you chose him," I said, voice steady, unwavering. Her face crumbled, and I turned away, walking back inside, leaving her in the storm she had created. That night, I stood by the window, reflecting on the journey. Betrayal had shattered a part of me, yes, but it had also forged a stronger, wiser version of who I could be. I had faced deception, heartbreak, and manipulation, and emerged not as a victim, but as someone who had reclaimed dignity, control, and self-respect. The road ahead was mine, unencumbered, and filled with possibility. The morning after her rain-soaked plea, I awoke with an unexpected sense of calm. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil I had faced, yet inside, I felt a quiet victory. It wasn't about gloating or revenge. It was about control, clarity, and the reclamation of my life. My apartment, once a place where deceit had found sanctuary, now felt like a fortress of my renewed identity. Each object, each corner, reflected my presence, my choices, and my authority over my own world. Theo dropped by mid-morning, a knowing smirk on his face as he noticed the subtle changes. "Looks like someone's moving forward," he said, gesturing to the carefully organized space. I nodded, appreciating the validation. We brewed coffee, sitting in companionable silence, the past lingering in unspoken acknowledgement but no longer dictating the present. Theo's support wasn't just about friendship. It was about reminding me that I didn't need her validation to feel whole. I immersed myself in physical training more intensely than before. Running, strength exercises, and yoga became daily rituals not for vanity, but for discipline. Each session was a reaffirmation of autonomy, my body responding to my commands, my stamina growing alongside my confidence. The discipline spilled into other areas of life: diet, sleep, work, productivity. Every choice I made was intentional, a deliberate step toward rebuilding the man she had underestimated. Work became another battlefield of transformation. I sought out challenging projects, pushing past comfort zones and demonstrating capability I had previously ignored. Bosses noticed, promotions followed, and recognition from colleagues gradually replaced the invisible weight of betrayal I had carried. Each success was a silent statement. I was more than the sum of her deceit. Every meeting, every email, every achievement added layers to the identity I was crafting. A man defined not by heartbreak, but by resilience and competence. Amid these routines, I started writing in earnest. The blog I had begun as a private outlet for my thoughts on betrayal and growth now became a platform. Anonymous at first, it drew attention quickly. People reached out with their own stories of heartbreak, deceit, and recovery. Readers resonated with the honesty, the methodical approach to overcoming manipulation, and the emphasis on personal empowerment. The blog became a network, a community, a voice for those who felt unseen, undervalued, or trapped by toxic relationships. The evidence I had collected began to serve dual purposes. Legally, it strengthened my case in the divorce proceedings, ensuring that I could protect assets, rights, and personal boundaries. Personally, it provided clarity. Seeing the lies, the inconsistencies, the betrayals laid out plainly helped remove emotional fog. Each documented text, photo, and conversation was a reminder. I had seen through the facade, and I had chosen action over passive suffering. She attempted contact intermittently, calls at odd hours, texts begging for explanations, even appearances near my office. Each attempt was met with the same measured response: silence. It wasn't cruelty. It was strategy. Engaging would have implied uncertainty or dependence. By remaining unresponsive, I asserted that my life was no longer intertwined with hers unless I consciously chose it. That realization alone shifted the power dynamics in ways that words could never have achieved. The legal side progressed steadily. Clara guided me through each step, filing motions, preparing statements, organizing financials. The divorce, while emotionally taxing, was executed with precision. The paperwork, once a symbol of finality, became a testament to self-sufficiency and clarity. Every signature, every document, reinforced a principle I had begun to embrace fully. Boundaries are strength, and enforcement of those boundaries is non-negotiable. In parallel, I cultivated personal growth outside work and legal matters. I reconnected with old friends, pursued creative hobbies, and allowed myself moments of joy previously denied by stress and betrayal. Guitar sessions, photography walks, and long runs were no longer escapes. They were affirmations that life could be meaningful and fulfilling without relying on anyone who had proven untrustworthy. Each smile, each shared laugh, each quiet sunset reminded me of independence's quiet power. Unexpectedly, my writing and public reflections began to attract attention from professional networks. Offers for workshops, speaking engagements, and mentorship opportunities arrived. What had started as personal catharsis became a platform for influence. People wanted to hear my story, not for scandal, but for insight, guidance, and inspiration. I realized that my experiences, though painful, could catalyze change in others' lives. There was purpose in the pain and power in the narrative I was shaping. Then came the turning point. She attempted one last, desperate public reconciliation. At a gathering with mutual acquaintances, she tried to manipulate perceptions, portraying herself as misunderstood and seeking forgiveness. I stood firm, calm, and composed. Her theatrics held no sway. Friends, colleagues, and strangers alike saw the contrast between her desperate posturing and my quiet confidence. The silent assertion of dignity carried more weight than any argument, any confrontation, any desperate plea she could muster. Through this period, I also embraced self-reflection. I acknowledged mistakes I had made, patterns I wanted to break, and behaviors I aimed to cultivate. Stoicism became not just philosophy but practice, emotional regulation, deliberate decision-making, and clarity of purpose. Pain was acknowledged but not indulged. Betrayal was recognized but not allowed to define my existence. Each day, I built resilience, not resentment, fortitude, not fixation. As months passed, her presence faded from my immediate life. Legal finality, combined with my personal growth, ensured that the impact of her betrayal diminished. My days were filled with structured activity, meaningful connections, and purposeful creation. The man I had been, the man vulnerable, dependent, and blindsided, was gone. In his place stood someone measured, confident, and capable of facing adversity without crumbling. Finally, the moment of full recognition arrived. During a speaking engagement for young professionals, I shared aspects of my journey, discretion intact, but lessons clear. Betrayal, heartbreak, and manipulation were reframed as catalysts for self-improvement and empowerment. The audience responded with admiration, questions, and engagement. For the first time, the narrative of pain was fully transformed into a narrative of power, influence, and autonomy. I returned home that evening, walking through the apartment that had become a symbol of regained agency. The spaces that once hosted fear and doubt now reflected control and calm. As I looked around, I realized the full extent of the transformation. Not just in circumstances, but in mindset, body, and spirit. Betrayal had not destroyed me. It had sculpted me into someone who could endure, adapt, and triumph quietly yet decisively. The months following my emergence from the chaos of betrayal were a blur of productivity, reflection, and subtle victories. Each day, I carved a life that required no validation from her or anyone who had underestimated me. The apartment, now fully my sanctuary, reflected meticulous care. Shelves organized, books arranged by theme, and personal mementos displayed, not as reminders of loss, but as markers of my journey. The space itself had become a symbol of autonomy, a physical manifestation of the inner order I had fought so hard to reclaim. Mornings began early, ritualistic. I woke before sunrise, allowing the city's quiet to frame my runs, the rhythm of footsteps against pavement mirroring the steady rebuilding of my identity. Every mile was a meditation, a shedding of residual anger, a reaffirmation that I was moving forward. Strength training complemented the running. Each drop of sweat was an investment in discipline and resilience. My body, once a passive participant in life's trials, was now a testament to perseverance and intentionality. Work became not just a necessity but a proving ground. Projects I had once hesitated to tackle were now opportunities to demonstrate mastery. I took on responsibilities with precision and focus, earning respect and recognition from colleagues and leadership alike. Promotions, raises, and accolades followed naturally, a byproduct of consistent effort and strategic action. Each success reinforced a simple truth: competence, persistence, and integrity are more powerful than anger or bitterness. My accomplishments were my silent rebuttal, louder than any confrontation could have been. Parallel to professional advancement, I nurtured creative outlets. The guitar, once abandoned in frustration, became a tool for expression and catharsis. Music allowed me to process emotions, turning grief and betrayal into harmonies that soothed and inspired. Photography walks captured moments of quiet beauty, reminding me that life offered richness beyond relational turmoil. Writing, initially private, evolved into a platform where personal experience met universal lessons. The blog, steadily growing, resonated with readers who had suffered similar betrayals or sought guidance on reclaiming their lives. It was proof that personal pain, when transformed thoughtfully, could create impact beyond the self. Social dynamics also shifted. Friends I had neglected during the storm became anchors again, offering support and grounding. Theo remained a cornerstone, an unwavering presence, encouraging growth while providing the occasional nudge toward accountability. Other acquaintances, inspired by my progress, sought mentorship and guidance. I realized that influence extended naturally from authenticity. The more I lived intentionally, the more people gravitated toward example rather than instruction. Legal matters moved toward closure. Clara had been meticulous, navigating the divorce with precision and foresight. Final papers were filed, and settlements executed, each document symbolizing not just an ending, but a new beginning. The dissolution of marriage, once a source of anxiety and grief, became an empowering milestone. Boundaries were legally cemented, leaving no room for her manipulation or intrusion. I had reclaimed my narrative entirely, emotionally, legally, and socially. Amid these achievements, she reappeared sporadically, attempting to test my resolve. Calls and messages arrived, often crafted to evoke sympathy or guilt. Sometimes she showed up at locations she knew I frequented, hoping for spontaneous encounters. Each approach was met with deliberate neutrality. I had learned that engagement would equate to vulnerability. Silence and composure conveyed more power than confrontation ever could. She saw the unshakable calm, the absence of need, and the contrast with the man she had known, an unspoken lesson in consequence and personal growth. Financial independence became another area of focus. Investments, careful budgeting, and entrepreneurial ventures supplemented income and reinforced autonomy. Mentoring Sasha and Omar in their startup ventures was particularly rewarding. Their success reflected my ability to guide without controlling, to provide resources and insight while honoring their agency. This process, in turn, strengthened my belief that influence was a measure of wisdom and restraint rather than control or dominance. The blog's impact expanded beyond personal narrative. Invitations to speak at conferences and workshops materialized, first locally, then internationally. Each engagement allowed me to translate personal experience into universal lessons, identifying manipulation, establishing boundaries, cultivating resilience, and embracing self-improvement. Audience responses confirmed that my story resonated not because it was sensational, but because it was authentic. Pain, when processed thoughtfully, could educate, inspire, and transform. Through this process, I noticed subtle shifts in self-perception. Confidence, once reactive, became intrinsic. Decision-making was deliberate, measured, and free from emotional bias. I no longer sought validation from past relationships or external approval. The man I had become was defined by autonomy, clarity, and resilience, a stark contrast to the man blindsided by betrayal. Each day's choices reinforced identity, purpose, and strength. The personal narrative extended into health and lifestyle. Nutritional discipline, regular physical activity, and mindfulness practices became habitual, not burdensome. The connection between physical well-being and mental clarity became undeniable. My energy levels, focus, and emotional stability improved steadily, allowing me to approach challenges with strategic calm rather than reactive emotion. The disciplined body mirrored the disciplined mind, a tangible manifestation of internal growth. The emotional dimension deepened with reflection. Journaling, meditation, and introspection were tools to examine patterns, acknowledge mistakes, and cultivate empathy. Not for her, but for myself. Understanding my own reactions, triggers, and desires allowed me to interact with the world from a place of strength rather than reactivity. Emotional intelligence became a cornerstone of identity, complementing physical, professional, and creative growth. Months turned into a year, and the culmination of effort became evident. Invitations to high-profile speaking engagements, feature articles on personal development platforms, and growing readership confirmed the trajectory of influence. Recognition arrived not through spectacle, but through authentic demonstration of transformation. Life, once derailed by deception, was now aligned with values, priorities, and potential. The man I had become could navigate adversity with composure and create impact without relying on external validation. Then came a symbolic encounter. At a networking event, she appeared, perhaps seeking acknowledgement or reconciliation. I noticed the subtle nervousness, the contrast with my calm presence. She approached, attempting casual conversation, but I maintained measured politeness without engagement. The message was clear. Respect and connection are earned, not demanded. Power had shifted from reactionary emotion to deliberate control. The encounter, brief and uneventful, underscored the distance between who I had been and who I had become. By the end of the year, the synthesis of effort, discipline, and intentional living had created a life that was independent, fulfilling, and resilient. Betrayal, while painful, had become a catalyst for comprehensive growth. Physical strength, emotional intelligence, professional success, creative fulfillment, and social influence converged into a cohesive narrative of empowerment. Each choice, each action, reinforced the reality that personal agency outweighs external circumstance. The process was neither instantaneous nor effortless. There were moments of doubt, fatigue, and nostalgia for what had been. Yet, the commitment to forward motion, self-improvement, and boundary setting ensured that setbacks were temporary, learning opportunities rather than derailments. Patience and persistence became not abstract ideals, but lived experience. Ultimately, part 5 of this journey represents the consolidation phase, where lessons crystallize, growth solidifies, and the past's shadows diminish. It is the stage where resilience becomes habitual, influence becomes natural, and autonomy becomes identity. Betrayal is acknowledged, lessons are internalized, and life moves forward with purpose, clarity, and quiet triumph. The final phase of this journey arrived quietly, yet it carried the weight of everything that had come before. By now, the life I had rebuilt was no longer tentative, it was undeniable. Each decision I made, each success I accumulated, was proof that betrayal had not ended me, but had instead opened a doorway to transformation. The calm I felt was hard-earned, a result of months of discipline, reflection, and relentless forward momentum. I had learned that triumph was less about vengeance and more about mastery over self. It was a rainy evening when the convergence of all my efforts became poignantly clear. I had been invited to a speaking engagement in a nearby city, a conference focused on personal resilience and relationship recovery. Walking onto the stage, I felt a familiar rush of nerves tempered by confidence. The crowd was diverse, attentive, and expectant. Faces reflected curiosity, hope, and, in some cases, personal pain. I realized with a quiet satisfaction that my story had transcended personal narrative. It had become a beacon for others navigating similar trials. As I spoke, recounting moments of heartbreak, betrayal, and the deliberate choices that led to recovery, I noticed the subtle nods, the occasional glistening eyes, and the attentive posture of those listening. Vulnerability, when coupled with action, resonated profoundly. I did not dwell on anger or humiliation. Instead, I emphasized growth, boundaries, and resilience. My narrative carried the weight of authenticity, illustrating that suffering could lead to self-empowerment, and that betrayal, while painful, could catalyze transformation. Midway through the session, a familiar figure appeared in the audience. She had come, unannounced, and I could feel the tension in the air. Not for me, but perhaps for her own unresolved feelings. Our eyes met briefly. There was no accusation, no lingering resentment on my side, only quiet acknowledgement. She had likely assumed I would still be the man devastated by her deceit, but the calm confidence I exuded made the contrast undeniable. My life had become a statement far louder than words could convey. Betrayal had been a door, and I had walked through it with intention and integrity. After the session, attendees approached with questions, gratitude, and stories of their own. People wanted guidance, perspective, and reassurance that they too could emerge stronger from pain. I engaged with each individual patiently, listening as much as I spoke. This interaction reinforced a profound truth. Influence comes from authenticity and shared experience, not ego or spectacle. My past, once a source of shame, had been converted into an instrument of empowerment. Later that evening, in the quiet of my hotel room, I reflected on the past year. The months of running before dawn, the late nights spent writing and planning, the professional risks and creative experiments. They all converged into a life that was rich in purpose and self-possession. I opened my laptop and checked the blog. Messages from readers, shares, and comments filled the screen. Many wrote that my story had inspired them to set boundaries, pursue self-improvement, or leave toxic situations. I realized the scope of impact far exceeded what I had imagined. My personal journey had become a source of collective empowerment. She reached out again, this time through a direct message, requesting a meeting. I read it calmly, noting the subtleties in tone. Remorse, curiosity, perhaps even hope for reconciliation. But I had learned that reconciliation is only meaningful when it aligns with mutual respect, trust, and accountability. My response was measured. I declined the invitation politely but firmly. The decision was not born of spite, but of understanding that my path forward was independent, and my peace required boundaries. Life was no longer about proving anything to her. It was about honoring my own growth and well-being. The next days were filled with continued work and personal fulfillment. I invested in new ventures, deepened friendships, and expanded my creative expression. Music and photography were no longer hobbies but essential forms of emotional expression, grounding me in the present while connecting me to others. Social events, once intimidating and fraught with past memories, became opportunities to celebrate achievement, network authentically, and enjoy companionship free of manipulation or deceit. A turning point arrived when I was invited to speak at an international event, a personal development summit in Milan. The thought of returning to a stage in a foreign country, representing months of disciplined effort, filled me with quiet pride. Preparation was meticulous. Each anecdote, each insight, was crafted to balance emotional depth with actionable wisdom. The journey from heartbreak to empowerment had equipped me with lessons that transcended my personal experience. They were universal truths about resilience, choice, and self-worth. Upon arriving in Milan, I was struck by the elegance of the city, the hum of energy in the streets, and the anticipation of the summit. Backstage, I reviewed my notes one last time, feeling the familiar tension before speaking. But unlike the past, this tension was productive, a sign of engagement and readiness rather than fear. Stepping onto the stage, the applause was immediate and enveloping. For a moment, I simply allowed myself to breathe, to feel the culmination of every choice, every struggle, every mile run and word written. The keynote unfolded seamlessly. I shared the story of betrayal, the silent dinners, the nights spent in contemplation, the runs at dawn, the blog that became a movement, and the personal boundaries that ultimately defined my path. The audience responded with intensity, questions, nods, and moments of visible recognition. In that room, I felt the power of transformation fully realized. Personal adversity had become public inspiration. My life, once shadowed by deceit, now shone as an example of intentional living. After the presentation, I walked through the streets of Milan alone, rain gently falling, a motif now familiar and symbolic. Reflection filled me with a calm gratitude. Betrayal had been painful, but it had been a teacher. Growth had been deliberate, hard-earned, and transformative. Each step I took reinforced the reality that life's challenges are gateways, not barriers, and that self-respect, discipline, and resilience yield rewards that no external validation can match. In the quiet moments, I revisited memories of her. The lies, the confrontation, the heartbreak. But these recollections no longer carried sting. They were reminders of lessons learned, of strength forged in fire. Pain had been transmuted into clarity, confusion into purpose, and loss into opportunity. My identity was no longer tethered to what had been, but anchored in who I had become, resilient, capable, and self-possessed. Returning home, the cityscape greeted me as a familiar canvas for continued growth. Life unfolded with balance and intention. Friendships, career, creativity, and self-care were harmonized. The narrative of betrayal existed, but only as a reference point, never as a shadow over present achievement. I had walked through the door betrayal had opened, and what lay beyond was freedom, self-mastery, and quiet triumph. The final reflection, as I closed this chapter, was simple yet profound. Empowerment is not derived from revenge, confrontation, or external recognition. It is cultivated through consistent action, self-respect, discipline, and the deliberate choice to prioritize one's own growth. Life is not defined by those who wrong us, but by the choices we make in response. Betrayal, once devastating, had become a doorway, and I had stepped through it with clarity, strength, and unwavering resolve. As night fell, I sat by the window, city lights twinkling below, rain pattering softly against the glass. A silent toast to myself seemed appropriate, a recognition of the man who had endured, rebuilt, and emerged stronger. No applause, no audience, just quiet acknowledgement. The journey from heartbreak to empowerment was complete, yet it was only the beginning of a life fully owned, fully lived, and fully respected. Did this story hit close to home? Share your thoughts in the comments below and let me know how you'd handle betrayal. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more real-life relationship stories and lessons on self-respect.